This video is made possible by Practical Defense Systems, the best online security training at the lowest prices. You can start your security career today online at pdsclasses.com. Check them out. Hi, I'm Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV. I'm very, very grateful. You'll find this interview along with any others that I do on all of these places right here. So check them out. That's the end of the preamble at the moment. We have a long interview, I suspect, because there's a lot to talk about. Gavin Gruesom's press conference. Let's get right to it. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me this morning. I appreciate it. I have to admit, because we're going to talk about Gavin Gruesome nuisance, Gavin nuisance, whatever you want to call him. I know so here's the deal in this interview. I've been so busy trying to get our law enforcement simulator going and the classroom going, and my wife and I spent all day running around buying stuff for the classroom and all that. I've been after that for 2 weeks. So I don't even know what Gruesome Nuisance proposed the other day. I have heard through the grapevine that he went off on St. Benitez, Judge Benitez, and others. But I don't, so just assume in this interview that I know nothing about this, and you will be correct. So having said that, that's what I say to Rick. We're going to go pig hunting. And I said, I would love to go pig hunting with you, Rick, but assume that I know nothing, and you will be correct. So just tell me what to bring and what to wear and where am I going and what gun do I bring, and then I'll just do what you tell me. You know, you got to do that with friends, though. Don't ever say that to somebody who's going to pull practical jokes on you. It just doesn't work very well. All right, so anyway, back to the subject at matter. What is going on? Now, there is one subject I would like to cover today, though, and that is the proposed ban on body armor, and there's a specific reason for that. We can address that down the road. What's going on with our intrepid governor, Gruesome Nuisance, other than the fact that he wants to be in the White House?
Go ahead and start, Rick.
Yeah, so there were a couple things. At the beginning of the week, Sam and I had discussed, as we often do, there was an article that was released by the Giffords, which was, believe it or not, the 10 things California needed to do to really, truly be trying to seal up gun violence, because we haven't done enough as a state. And so within maybe 2 hours-ish, the governor announced, oh, we're going to have a news conference. And Sam and I have seen this before where, you know, another group that's usually anti-2A puts out a list of things they want done. And then usually within 24 hours or so, the state legislature and or the governor are coming out with a press conference to do, ironically, those 10 things like it was their idea the whole time.
Wow.
What a shock. Wow, okay.
You know, when it came out, we kind of looked at all of it. And so I think it's safe to say that everybody was kind of prepped for, there's going to be like probably half a dozen bills being proposed or other ones that have already been proposed, tweaked to meet what the Giffords had brought out. And instead, in my opinion, it ended up being a press conference to use the tragedies in January to prop up I'm not running for president, but I am running for president campaign on behalf of the governor. And hey, this is how we're going to get Senator Portantino to be Congressman Portantino by kicking that off right now, because Sacramento, in my mind, has went beyond crazy. Normally, Sam and I would never talk about the next election until probably sometime at the very earliest, late summer. But the thing that I went out and talked about as a talking point after, and I'll say it here, was Newsom literally sat there because he got angry at a reporter's question and said, if you can call the Second Amendment, and then did air quotes, a right. And my comment immediately following that was, fear the leadership that takes the enumerated rights embedded in the U.S. Constitution that they took an oath to uphold and preserve and secure. And at the point that they start doubting that those very things they took that oath to are rights, be very fearful of that leadership, because it's now moving to a dictatorship.
Joel, this is the way I put it. It appears to me that Gavin Newsom and Rob Bonta and Anthony Portantino are in their death throes. And by that, I mean, you know, when you kill a deer and it goes down and it kind of shakes and shivers knowing that it's going to die and it stays right there. They're going through that because they know that their anti-Second Amendment predilections, policies are going to go down in flames. He acknowledged that the federal court is going to overturn California's assault weapons ban, the large capacity magazine ban, ammunition registration laws. And he stopped there, but he knows it's true with the roster of approved handguns, micro stamping, the way the 10-day waiting period is done. Across the board, the courts are about ready to declare California as unconstitutional land. It's no longer a anti-gun utopia.
Well, again, like I said, I'm not even aware of what they proposed, but it sounds like it's mostly bovine manure.
Well,
So, what
exactly?
exactly did he push forward, or was he just mouthing off? Like I said, I haven't had a chance to review it.
Well, what they did push forward was basically a very similar, I would say probably 97% similar, after looking at the changes, 918 that we beat last year all over. What they've tried to do, and
which just for clarification, in case somebody's not watching, 918
anti-Bruin decision bill that was cobbled together last June, that was designed to make it extremely hard for anybody to be able to get a CCW, keep a CCW in the state of California, make everything off limits. That was the one that we've talked about with you and the listeners before about, if you were a church, a synagogue, a cathedral, a mosque, you would have to say, we're standing up against the state of California, allowing our parishioners to bring in a firearm, making small businesses have to say you could, and that basically saying that they were non-compliant with the state legislature, and that list goes on. What I found interesting, and Sam's spot on with Portantino. Portantino's doing this like little dance, literally. I mean, he was physically like getting all amped up during the deal. The Attorney General Bonta comes out and tries to say, we have already done fact checked and we are completely compliant. I agree with Sam. I don't know what they were smoking, but they're not getting enough fresh air to think clearly. But what was absolutely appalling was how Newsom literally went on the offense and was completely breaking away from Portantino and Bonta when he mocked the history, text, and tradition by saying, hey, yeah, let's look at that. No town was bigger than 30,000 people. That doesn't apply to California. Everybody was farmers. That doesn't apply to California. So if you want to go back and be stupid like that and be radicalized like that, then yeah, but look, people, that's not reality. This is the reality that I say is California. That's your reality. And again, that goes back to that complete disregard for the federal government and for the Supreme Court, which is the law of the land. And one of the issues that I found absolutely appalling amongst all of them was they tried to tie it to the tragedies that happened in January. And one of the things I've been telling people is, let's just say, Joel, you have this great time machine. And so you're able to go back and the votes go the other way. Sam and I and some of the other colleagues of ours that fought so valiantly at the very end, and some of the senators and people that came on our side and fought on the floor against Bonta, we didn't win. And that vote went the other way. And 918 immediately became the law that night. It would have done nothing to stop what happened at Half Moon Bay. It would have done nothing to stop what happened at Monterey Park. And this is something that I think we've really got to start pushing out as a community. All of these laws against law-abiding citizens have done zero to stop these tragic acts of gun violence. At the same time, and I think our community has to be vocal about this. My son's in law enforcement, and he's had a couple of tough cases recently, and one of them, thanks to the governor and this legislature, resulted in a murder. The person had multiple felonies, aggravated assault, should have been in prison at the time they committed the murder, but because of removing those penalties, because, murder, rapist, what have you, you've been good for 30 days, we're going to let you out 6 years early. was on the streets and committed a felony that took a person's life and destroyed a family and the people that knew him. They never get to walk that back. We have a legislature that is doing its utmost to support criminals, to let them out early, to give them our taxpayer dollars so they can go hurt us again. And we're doing everything in this state to go after the law-abiding citizen and turn them into criminals, and do so in a very, very specific way that doesn't even give you the criminals the benefits that the bad guys have.
Which brings up an interesting couple of questions. One is, you mentioned, I mean, just about what you're talking about right now brings up the question of whether, because of this, the anti-Second Amendment efforts on the part of the legislature and the governor is actually popular in California anymore. I don't think it is. And the reason I don't think it is because I meet people at the range and have people taking courses with us who would never have taken courses with us before and had no interest in firearms before. And, you know, people of all shapes, sizes, colors, inclinations, whatever. And so I'm seeing a broader range of people show up at the range precisely because, and show up in classes precisely because of this kind of nonsense of supporting the criminals and not others. And I would like to know what you guys think, but I want to just throw a few other things out there that just for discussion as well. One is I would like to know what your read on when you think Judge Benitez will actually publish a ruling on some of these things, because you probably don't know. I'm sure you don't know, but I do get the question a lot. Has he forgotten us? Did he go on vacation? Is he retired? Which of course, none of which is the case. And I think the other thing is that with Gavin Newsom, like I said, I had not seen the press conference because I've been busier than a one-legged man at a butt-kicking contest. But the idea of his argument that the tradition makes no sense and the history makes no sense because the towns were smaller then, that doesn't apply to California, and then, you know, it was agrarian society, it doesn't apply to California, and so on. I wonder if anybody who doesn't like the Second Amendment who would accept that argument would apply a similar argument to any of the rights that they like. Would they apply that argument to the First Amendment? Oh, well, you know, the internet wasn't around at that point. It was all a printing press, and it wasn't the kind of printing presses I learned how to use in high school, the AB Dick 360 presses and like that. You actually had to set the type one letter at a time, and it was a press that came down. And so, yeah, you have a First Amendment right, but only as it applies to using a press like that, or you can write things down with your pen and your paper, because that's the way it was back then. And of course, now that's what you'd have to do now. It doesn't apply to computers or the internet or what. We don't apply that kind of a test to whether a right, any other right in the Constitution, is valid today. If we did, we would have no rights at all. So if you're watching this and you really like the idea of what gruesome nuisance has said, I challenge you to apply it to any right you really like and would not like to lose. Because Rick's point earlier is a very good one. When you have a government that is picking and choosing the rights that you can have and picking and choosing the parts of the Constitution they want to abide by, even though they've taken an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the country against all enemies, foreign and domestic, then it's not going to be long after they've picked on the Second Amendment before they start picking on the First, the Third, the Fourth, the Fifth. You may not know what the Third is. Look it up. They'll start garrisoning people in your house. If you don't like the Fourth, you don't like the Fifth, you don't like the Sixth, guess what? That's your search and seizure rights. That's your right against self-incrimination. That's your right to due process. That's your right to have an attorney. That's your right to all those kinds of things. Well, you know, back in the days in the smaller towns, they just hung people. They didn't have an appeals or any of that kind of stuff. You know, the circuit judge was that. It was it. There was nobody above them, and they just hung them outside where everybody could see. Do we want to return to that? Seriously? So I think that's one thing that I think we have to look at is when politicians make these kind of asinine arguments, and that's what they are, we should ask ourselves, okay, maybe I don't care about that right, but do I care about the other ones? Anyway, I would like to know what you guys think about Judge Benitez, what's going on with that, and then also, am I accurate in my anecdotal feeling that the Second Amendment has become more popular, not less, and that this anti-Second Amendment effort on the part of these politicians is not nearly as popular as it was before?
Joel, I expect that Judge Benitez will be issuing his rulings on 4 cases on the California Assault Weapons Control Act, large capacity magazine ban, the ammunition registration laws, and also billy clubs, which is really interesting. And I think this is one of the reasons why Governor Newsom's attack on Judge Benitez is so off base. He, I believe, is being extremely thorough to cross every T and dot every I to make sure that all of the proper and appropriate procedures for evaluating the issues.
You're talking about Judge Benitez, not Newsom.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I knew.
Benitez,
I wasn't tracking with you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That he is taking the time to do this right, to make it, for lack of better terms or descriptions, bulletproof, so that when it eventually does go to the 9th, they're going to have to say, well, that was a very well-reasoned argument. It took into account text, history, and tradition. He listened to both sides, and he applied Bruin, Heller, McDonald, Caetano, Bruin, all to this decision. And it's going to make it much more difficult for the 9th to overcome. And that's why, although we are anxious to get a ruling as soon as possible, I am very happy to wait for Judge Benitez to take his time to do it right, because when he does it right, which I've never seen him not do it right, it is powerful. Now,
Sam, do you believe that by doing that, he will actually save us time? Because if he doesn't do it, then am I right in estimating that if he doesn't do that, then there's more likely to have it overturned at the 9th, and then we're back in the fight again? But if he does make it, he plugs in all the holes. Mm-hmm. Does that put us in a position where maybe we don't have quite as many battles to make sure that that we actually get rid of some of this crap?
I think what he's doing in doing it this way is that he is. My sense is that the 9th ultimately is going to have to rule according to what the decisions from the Supreme Court rule. But what he's doing is he's avoiding all of the time-wasting tactics that the state of California is using to file charges. Oh, this was inappropriately heard. We didn't have, a trial. There was no discovery. We didn't have a chance to hire our own historians to figure out if there were any historical analogs to the rules we are really. So they would file time-wasting motions in order to slow the process down, because, like I said, they know this issue is going to die at their feet, and they're doing everything they can to prevent that or prolong the agony and go kicking and screaming. So I think that the judge is showing an incredible amount of responsibility and appropriate attention to the rule of law in the United States. So I too am on pins and needles. Every day I come in to check to see if he's released his rulings. Now remember, in 3 of these cases, he has already ruled. And in those rulings that the 9th ultimately overturned, he actually used the test of Bruin before Bruin. So,
well, and Chuck Michelle was telling me one day, and perhaps, you're nodding your head over there, Rick, so I know you agree with Sam on this. But Chuck was telling me that there's a difference between that finding an attorney who can litigate and is really a good attorney is different than being a judge, in that if you're going to be an excellent judge, you have to be able to write. Mm-hmm. And you can be a great attorney but not have the ability to write good decisions. That is an art form in and of itself, and that the people who can actually do that and do that well are rather a small percentage or smaller group of legal scholars that can actually write a well-reasoned, bulletproof, to use your term, decision. And certainly Judge Benitez is one of those people. His decisions are very well-reasoned, very detailed. And I'm wondering, do you agree with that estimation, Rick, that that's what he's doing, that he's making this as unassailable as he possibly can make it before he issues a ruling?
Yeah, I without a doubt, I agree with everything Sam said. I would add 2 other little parts to this. I think you have to realize too, I mean, we talk about history, text, and tradition in terms of what happened back. But if you were to look at the history, text, and tradition of what's going on in the present, Benitez is having to write these rulings, and why you're seeing Bonta, Portantino, and Newsom all freaking out is Sam brought up the timeline, and the timeline's absolutely correct. The state's going to do whatever it can. But I think we're remiss not to look at why. And they know. I mean, Newsom all but said, we've lost. I mean, in his press conference our day. Okay, well, then if you know you've lost, then why are you doing what you're doing? And here's the answer, in my opinion. I'll see what Sam has to say on it. But I would assert it's because if Newsom and Bonta can hold off these decisions till after the 24 elections, they can use all this as critical parts of their platform. Look what we did, and other people running in other states are on this bandwagon, and those organizations like Brady, Giffords, Moms That Demand Action can use those. But if we have a really tight set of decisions that come out of Benitez, I believe O'Neill's the other one, correct me if I don't have the right judge, but like if we get those decisions, guess what? They lose all those platforms. And that is what's at the heart of the big money right now. I don't think anybody with the big money supporting the far left thinks they can win. They're just trying to keep this as a campaign platform, kind of like trying to keep a laptop out of a presidential race. I mean, it's the same concept. And I think our community's got to realize that's part of what Sam and I and everybody else on this side are fighting up in the Capitol is the politics of the 24 election are intrinsically, in my opinion, tied to what we're dealing with right now.
So they're just being disingenuous, sneaky, and dishonest, is what you're saying. And
or business as usual in Sacramento,
right? Which is sort of well, and in the U.S. Capitol as well. So what is your read on the current popularity among Californians of these kinds of anti-gun efforts now? I'm starting to see it shift the other direction, but you guys are actually probably have a better read on that than I do. What are your thoughts?
Joel, the fact that in the last year and a half or so that over 400,000 people in the state of California bought a gun for the first time, it tells you that the pendulum is shifting on people's perspective on owning a gun and being their own first line of defense. Prop 63, we're up right now. It might have been a little bit different than it was back when it passed the Gunmageddon initiative. But, I'm going to be brutally honest with you, Joel. It doesn't matter what public opinion or our leaders believe or support. It is the Constitution. We live in a constitutional republic. That is the law of the land. Like it or lump it. If you don't like it, you cannot pass legislation to violate it. You have to work to change the Constitution. And frankly, the other side knows they have an ice cube's chance in Hades of passing a constitutional amendment to get rid of the Second Amendment.
By the way, my grandfather used to say that they don't have the chance of a fart in a whirlwind. And I think you're exactly right. Whatever analogy you want to use, I think you're exactly right, Sam. I would like to ask you guys this, and that is, and maybe, and then we'll do last word because we're running long on time here. As you mentioned, my email blew up right after the press conference, and I was like, "Whoa, wait!" because I was in the office trying to get the classroom ready. I didn't even know it was happening. Should California gun owners be freaking out over Newsom's latest press conference and this latest grandstanding in public?
I honestly don't think they should. I believe that we have this pretty well handled. We're going to be fighting. We need their support, obviously. We are going to need them out there calling in and working with both GOC and CRPA in this fight and other organizations. But going back to something Sam said, I do want to add one thing. Absolutely, Constitution comes first. Here would be the interesting thing that I would apply to that, and that is we're seeing a lot of minority groups, Asians, African Americans, Latinos, that are coming out not only pro 2A, but extremely strong pro 2A. And I think this is going to be something that we're going to be able to leverage, because the Constitution was written for the minority in this country. And so I kind of laugh when Newsom goes off that we're the 99%, which that's not even a close to the number, but we don't like what you guys want to do. Well, guess what? That Constitution was written to defend the 1%. And those different minority groups that are now coming into their own with the Second Amendment, and it's not just the 400,000 this last year, there was over 1 million people that joined into those ranks during the pandemic. And a large chunk of that were minorities and women. Those voices are going to be harder and harder to silence, because they know what it takes to go stop an egregious government. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that kind of support.
So before we wrap up, I'm going to give you guys last word here in a minute. Let's talk about the body armor thing. And the reason I want to talk about the body armor thing is I know, if I'm right or wrong, the current law makes it a felony to use body armor or wear it when committing a crime. But we have a situation where we have active shooters and all that kind of stuff. And so in addition to folks like me, law enforcement, security contractors, people who are changing the money at the ATM, armored car drivers like that, there's also the parent who wants to buy a body armor shield of some sort, some light body armor to put in the backpack for their kids. Body armor has a lot of uses that helps protect people against these kind of things. And if the state tries to ban it, they're going to hurt a lot more people than they're going to help. So I'm curious where that bill is. What are the chances of that actually happening? I mean, can you give me any information about that at all?
Not that I get greedy, but there's sometimes when a bill comes across the desk, I'm like, this is going to be fun to fight. And Sam will tell you, I got pretty giddy on this one, because the way they define body armor, Joel, it's not just what you said, like some law enforcement would wear. They kept it fairly open. And so that doesn't just apply, but yeah, the kids' backpacks, school teachers, let's think about firearms instructors, range safety officers. None of those are on the proposed DOJ approved list of people that can use it. Not to mention the Hollywood elite that often wear body armor to protect themselves, politicians. So I see enough holes that Sam and I could drive 16 lanes of semis through this argument all day long, honking like it's an old C.W. McCall convoy song. Right through it.
I should tell you before you go, Sam, that my phone is blown up about this too, and a lot of it's been the very kinds of folks you discussed, and that is, I've had a couple of firearms instructors contact me because I've been teaching people how to shoot for 20 years, and I've had 3 instances where a student has almost shot me. And so there's a reason why I wear armor when I'm teaching, and most firearms instructors do for that very reason. Anyway, go ahead.
This shows how shallow the policymakers are in the state of California. In the case Caetano versus Massachusetts, where the Supreme Court held that something that was in common use for lawful purposes, like stun guns, not guns, but stun guns, for defense or to protect oneself, was constitutional, and the court said, yeah, there were over 200,000 stun guns in private hands throughout America. That makes it in popular use. There are far more instances where body armor is available. And so the fact that it's not a gun does not mean that it doesn't have Second Amendment protections. If somebody chooses to use body armor or a taser, something less lethal, a billy club, a baton, to protect themselves and defend themselves, it is protected by the Second Amendment. And even if they pass this bill, I think that it will not see the light of day once we go to court and show that this is a pure violation of the Second Amendment. And we can talk about all of the stupidity and the short-mindedness from the legislature in sponsoring this bill the way they did.
And so we're running real short on time, guys. I'm going to give you each about a minute or two to wrap up. Last word, Sam? Go.
You know what? Now is not the time to be afraid. Now is the time to open your eyes and clearly understand that we are facing an intractable enemy of the Constitution and the Second Amendment and your God-given rights So if you want to jump on the train that is winning across the country in lawsuits in New York, New Jersey, Illinois, Texas, Colorado, Oregon, across the fruited plain, we are winning, and the Second Amendment is winning. If you want to be a part of the positive fight, get involved. From your own couch, you could be an activist by sending a contribution to Gun Owners of California, CRPA, Gun Owners of America, these groups that are actually providing that defense in the courts. We have to pay lawyers because they have to feed their families. And that's a good thing. And I often say that, yeah, we're making sure that we're sending pizza and beer to our attorneys and not wanting them to leave their offices or their homes as they're writing our lawsuits and our amicus briefs. But now is not the time to be scared. Now is the time to say, hey, I want to be a part of this winning team that restores and protects the Second Amendment from sea to shining sea. And I want to be with the people who are making it happen. That's as simple as it is.
Absolutely. Now is not the time to let them freak you out. That's exactly what they wish to do. Now is the time to get in the fight. Rick, last word. Go.
Yeah, what I would say is everything that Sam did, but I would add another portion to this. The 24 election, regardless of what anybody says, has already begun. Now is the time for you that is listening to this to do one of three things, but you got to do one of them. Either A, decide that you're the man or woman for the job and start your campaign. Because as each of these candidates announce right now, as Sam will tell you, they can't go back to their positions. They have now vacated them. So when you see 4 or 5 people running for office, that's 4 or 5 openings. For each of those are going to be 4 or 5 openings, which means there's literally already in the state, I've counted up, I'm going to talk to Sam about it later this week. We are next week now, but we've already got like 60 positions that we know that are open for 24. Now's the time to get that candidate in there. Secondly, if you're not going to run, support these people by getting them out to speak as many places publicly, because a lot of those places are very vulnerable. Sam and I saw as he said, the stats are like, oh, if it's a plus this or a plus that, you can't win. We saw areas that were as much as +8 lose. We were able to flip it. So you know what? It's a wide open field where we sit right now, and you can close that gap right now by getting out there. And the last one is give money, because it's going to be money or time that's going to make this happen. But we have a chance to break the stranglehold on this state and start taking it back. It didn't fall overnight. It's not going to turn overnight, but probably this next election is the best shot we have at it.
Thank you very much for listening to the entire interview. I'm really grateful. Have a wonderful week. And wherever you go, whatever you do, stay safe.